You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. Some buzz out of College Station is that, man, this is maybe the most anticipated game there since A&M has been in the SEC. Can that be true? Let's find out. David Nuno is our buddy from Texas A&M, good enough to join us now. David, great to chat, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. I wouldn't say the most anticipated game, but I would say the game with the most implications, right? Like A&M has not played in such a meaningful game that could decide, a chance to be in the playoffs. Now, during the COVID season, they did go 9-1. I think they should have been in the playoffs. They were not. But those were, 25,000 people in attendance. This
Right.
game here against LSU, against two teams that I think fell under the radar for a little bit, especially after week one, to be in this position has raised the stakes. One team is still going to be mathematically into it, but the other one has put themselves in pole position for Atlanta with still some work to do, but certainly in a phenomenal spot.
Yeah, man. With whoever wins this game, we'll go into November still with a game to play with, where you feel like you could lose again and still be in great position. So a ton on the line. Hey, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. So the news we got on Wednesday night was that Chase Basantis is out. How big of a deal is that for A&M's offensive line?
Pretty big deal. I mean, he's one of our most consistent, best linemen. The line has actually had a lot of problems this year with injury situations. A couple centers back and forth. Coley went out for a little bit. They lost Mark Naboo after the first game of the season. They've had other injuries. Armez Reed has been out at times too. So Armaj Reed Adams has been out. So there's been some injuries there. But that being said, the guys that have come in have stepped up and done a very nice job. And that's what you need in the SEC. These injuries do happen. They've had so many guys go up and down out of the lineup on that offensive line. There have been people who can get in there. And Cam Dewberry stepped in last week, did a phenomenal job. We've seen him in multiple spots. So it's a big loss, but not one that they have not kind of gotten used to and have overcome in the past this season.
What's going on with Conner Weigman? Been up and obviously there's been an injury. Been seemingly up and down.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on. I would say outside of Nuss, who hasn't been up and down in the SEC, right? Like Nuss has been pretty consistent good. But when you look at some of the other guys, and I'm not comparing Conner's stats to what we've seen from other quarterbacks, like Carson Beck, who's had his ups and downs. Quinn Ewers finally had a down against a very good opponent in Georgia. I think with Conner, a couple things are happening. The game against Mississippi State, I thought he played pretty well. He had 4 throws he'd want to have back. And I guess I'm grading on a curve here. Mm-hmm. He also had amazing plays on third down. There was a 3rd and 23 situation where Mississippi State certainly had an opportunity to get some momentum, and he completed a pass to Trey Watson, the tight end. They got the first down. They were able to score a touchdown a couple plays later. He's really good. I think you saw the stat out there that he's been much better with pressure in his face than when he's got a clean pocket, which is a strange phenomenon. I think with Conner is when he gets rattled, it does affect him. But again, like what Jackson Dart's had his issues, right? Outside of Nuss, who has been really, really good. Jalen Milroe has his hot spots and then struggles as well. I think Conner, we got to remember he is, been in the system or 3 different systems at A&M, but he still hasn't played a complete season. I think this is going to be his 12th game going into this game against LSU.
Wow.
And that kind of tells you a little bit about his story.
That is great perspective. Came in so highly regarded, but you're right. Injuries have been one of the footnotes, if not a main chapter of his career. What about the weapons around him? I think, look, everybody here knows Le'Veon Moss from Baton Rouge. I'm not sure, David, I see the terrifying receivers that have been at A&M in the past. Evan Stewart, Moose Muhammad, Aniyah Smith, those types of guys. Are those guys on this team?
I don't think so, but Moose Muhammad is still on the roster. He's just not playing.
Yeah, he's not playing.
But he's still on the roster. Yeah, I would say no. But one thing I will say, you don't know who's going to get the call that day, right? You'll have Noah Thomas, who's been the closest thing to an alpha wide receiver on the team. He doesn't scare a lot of people, but he's got size. He's certainly got game-breaking ability. But they've been able to spread the ball. Jabri Barber, who got hurt, was supposed to be the number 1 wide receiver in theory after spring ball. He got hurt, comes in way earlier than expected, and finally had a really nice game this past weekend against Mississippi State. As I mentioned, Noah Thomas has had his games. You've had Ja'Day Walker have his moment. Cyrus Allen had the big game against Florida. One thing that this Colin Klein offense will do is they will spread the ball, and there isn't that Kyron Lacey, if you will. But there are some folks out there that will make you pay, and when Le'Veon Moss is going, it opens everything else up.
David, what did Notre Dame do so well to limit the A&M offense?
That's a great question. First off, they have a really good defensive line.
Yeah.
That's probably the best defensive line A&M has faced and will face this season outside of Texas. That's part of it. The other part is I think Conner was so bad in that game. And look, we just talked about Conner, the ups and downs. He was fantastic against Missouri. He was okay against Mississippi State. He was not good against Notre Dame. The A&M lost that game by 10 points, but that was really a tie game with 2 minutes left in the game. They had their opportunities. They had to go for it on fourth down, and then Notre Dame gets the short side of the field. A&M had a hard time establishing their run in that game. That was the one time that Le'Veon Moss really kind of struggled. And I wouldn't say he struggled. They just kind of had to abandon the run at times because they just couldn't get anything going. I think that's part of the reason. Like it's the fact that when Conner, who struggled so much with his happy feet, and you're not able to establish the run, but hey, you were tied in the fourth quarter. You can only, with 2 minutes left, that's what you asked for at Caulfield, to have that opportunity. That game didn't go their way. Since then, they've kind of rectified it.
David Nuno's with us, Texas Ags. You can get him on Twitter, X at David Nuno, Nuno, if you want to follow him. While the offense might be a little uneven throughout the year, David, there's no questioning the defense. Mike Elko is a great defensive coach, and despite losing some pretty key players, guys like Walter Nolan, they've been really good defensively. Is there something defensively year to year, especially considering some of the transfers or players they lost? Is there something that maybe has surprised you where they've exceeded defensively an expectation that you, or maybe generally speaking around the program, they had?
I think the secondary is way better than anyone expected. Now, Billy Lucci, I will give him credit in the spring. He's like, this secondary is going to be pretty good. Will Lee has been a phenomenal addition. Now, let's all go back to how a secondary and the defensive line need to work together, right? The defensive line creates those opportunities for the secondary to jump on some of these balls, but Will Lee has been so good there at cornerback. And, there's been injury back there as well, but Bryce Anderson going back to his normal safety position. Dalton Brooks has really grown as a second-year player and really, he got in trouble a couple of games by the targeting call that took him out of a couple of games. But he has grown into a really, really nice player. I think the secondary has been the surprise. Linebacker, a little bit of a surprise, too. Not that you don't expect nice linebacker play from Torian York, but when Edge Cooper goes to the NFL and that linebacker group struggles so much, because they did struggle in that Notre Dame game, to see what they've been able to do since that point, it has been so nice to see. I mean, Scooby Williams has been a great addition. And that's probably another part of this team, Matt, that I think should be stated. Mike Elko, teams go get transfers, right? Brian Kelly finds some transfers. Ole Miss certainly goes and gets transfers. Alabama does. You got to get the right transfers. And if you look at this team, the transfers that they have gotten have been the right transfers. Will Lee fits into the culture. Nick Scorton, obviously, he can fit in any culture as good as he is. But they've hit the lottery with some of these transfers that not only are producing on the field, fit with what Mike Elko wants to do.
David, even if people listening haven't watched a lot of A&M football, they probably heard Nick Scorton's name, and especially if you go read mock drafts or big boards and all that stuff, he's all over them. Are we going to get to see Scorton at that right end spot, a Scorton-Will Campbell matchup? Are they going to move him around? Might we see him on the other side against Emory Jones? Where best and how best do they use him?
I've seen him on both sides, but I do think we're going to see quite a bit of that. And that's going to be a fascinating matchup, right? Because when you talk about the offensive line that LSU has, am I right? I believe the number out there is they've only been sacked twice, and the last time was against South Carolina. Is that correct? Am I right on that number?
Both sacks came against South Carolina. So 6 of the 7 games they haven't given up a sack.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And A&M took a little while to get some sacks. They didn't happen right away. It took a few games. And once it started happening, they've been kind of trickling in, and there's been a nice consistency to it. I think we're going to get that matchup. And I think America, outside of Baton Rouge and College Station, you're going to be treated to he's going to win some, the other guy's going to win some. It's going to be phenomenal.
What about the kicking game? David, I always like to ask, the way I kind of ask it is, all right, there's 6 seconds left, 4 seconds left. Aggies are down by 2, and lining up from the left hash from 49. How confident are you that Bond makes the kick?
Pretty confident. 49, a little bit out of his range, I think.
47.
I think he had a 47. Yeah, 47 the other day. But, I mean, he has been really good. He had one, little hiccup at Florida when A&M already had a nice lead, and that game was already over, but it made it interesting for a few minutes there in the third quarter. But he's been really solid this year. He has grown quite a bit from last season. But you don't know until you get into these pressure cooker games, right? This is the game that if he's needed, we will find all out about him. But so far, I think he's been passing with flying colors. The last time he missed a couple of field goals was in the game that was already done.
David, what's the blueprint for Mike Elko if the Aggies get out of Kyle Field with a win on Saturday?
The blueprint is exactly what he says, and it sounds like coach speak, and it is coach speak, but it works. Just worry about the 6 inches in front of you. Worry about the next day. Do not worry about Texas. Do not worry about the SEC championship. Don't worry about that. The next thing is worry about South Carolina if you're able to beat LSU. And if you aren't able to beat LSU, then you got to go back to work and do the exact same thing. It's the process. He is such a process-driven coach. And I know coaches say that, but they preach it all the time. You hear the players regurgitate it when they come into our studios. Like it is really about the next day, the next moment. And, by the way, he learned a lot from Brian Kelly. He talked about him quite a bit. Like these brilliant coaches fall in love with the process. They don't fall in love necessarily with the results because the results come when you follow the process.
David Nuno, Tex Ags. Get him on Twitter, X at David Nuno, Nuno. Hey, man, we appreciate it. Enjoy the game Saturday. Actually, I hope you have a great day Saturday, but I hope you have a miserable 3.5 hours watching the football game.
It's interesting. I was thinking the same thing for you, man.
Always good to chat, man. Thank you.
See you, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.